David Tafuri, former foreign policy advisor for President Obama. David, thank you so much for being with us. Is this visit all about pressuring Belarus to join his war?
There's a lot of intrigue surrounding this visit. We don't necessarily know why Putin went. He's certainly trying to send a message to the world and maybe a message to Ukraine that he could use Belarus as a starting ground for a new offensive from the north into Ukraine. It could also be a ploy, though, to distract Ukraine from the progress it's making in the other battle sites inside Ukraine, especially in the east and in the south. It shouldn't be a substantial worry because Russia does not have that many troops in Belarus right now. It has about 10 to 15,000 troops. And even if Russia were able to convince Belarus to join the war, the Belarusian soldiers are unlikely to be motivated to fight. Their army is pretty small. It's about 50,000, and they're not battle tested at all. So it's not going to add much to the effort. What I think is more likely is that Putin is just trying to demonstrate that he has an ally, and he doesn't have very many, and there aren't many places he can go and travel. So this is one place he can travel to because Belarus is such a repressive nation like Russia.
All right, so David, expand upon that a little bit. So basically, if Belarus were to contribute troops, you're saying it really would not be enough to turn the tide, so to speak, of the war in Russia's favor.
That's right. Belarus is a nation of about 9 million people. It's the 72nd largest economy. So it adds very little in terms of support to Russia, especially when you consider all of the countries, the NATO countries that are much larger, with much larger militaries and more offensive weapons stockpiles that are supporting Ukraine. So I think it's more likely that Russia just wants to remind the world that it has a friend, wants to make a showing of solidarity with Belarus. Remember that Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, and Belarus basically owe their continuing existence as a dictatorship to Russia because they had a rigged election in 2020, and there was an uproar of violence and civil disobedience in Belarus, and Russia had to come to Belarus's aid. So Lukashenko is one of the few friends that really owe Putin, and therefore he's going to do whatever Putin wants, although he may not be willing to send in troops. And as I mentioned, it really doesn't add that much anyway.
Well, David, let's go to the war itself. Ukraine is accusing Russia of sending a drone over a power plant, and they call it a, quote, violation of nuclear and radiation safety. Is the threat of a nuclear incident becoming more likely as this war continues to drag on?
Well, this is scary information. This drone went over the nuclear power plant in Mykolaiv, a town in southern Ukraine. This nuclear power plant is still controlled by Ukraine, which is good and important. But the fact that Russia is surveying it or collecting intelligence on it, or perhaps looking at it as a target, is very scary. That would have massive implications, not just for the Ukrainian population, but for the population of Europe. So we have to be very careful and very vigilant about any offensive action that Russia plans to make against any nuclear power sites, including the one that it holds in Ukraine, which is in Zaporizhia. And so let's just hope that they're not really considering doing anything against this nuclear power plant. But it was right for Ukraine to warn the world about this.
Absolutely. And David, we talk about the fact this war now stretching months, so much longer than a lot of people had anticipated. You mentioned that Putin does not really have many allies. Are his days in power numbered?
It's really hard to say, and it's really going to be, up to the Russian people. I think Putin still controls Russia quite well. It's a very repressive police state. He doesn't allow political opposition. He targets any, political opponents. He has good control of the police and the intelligence agencies. And so he still has a tight hold on Russia. So it seems unlikely that the Russian people are going to be able to push him out. And more likely would be for the Ukrainians, supported by NATO, to continue to win on the battlefield, to the point where Putin feels vulnerable because his military has been denigrated so much by the Ukrainian forces that then that's what would most likely make him back off and pull back from his intent on controlling Ukraine.
All right, David Tafuri, thank you.
Thank you.